The dark sky of the old world crackled with the agonizing screams of 10,000 tormented souls. High atop the crumbling citadel, the massive skeletal form of the corpse god stood defiant against his final hour. Below the dark throne, the legendary hero Siryu charged forward with his holy blade raised high. Golden solar energy erupted from the hero's armor, instantly vaporizing the surrounding waves of undead soldiers. The ancient necromancer realized that his countless centuries of absolute rule had finally come to an end. Rather than accept total annihilation, the dark sorcerer began whispering a forbidden, long-forgotten incantation. Huge geometric circles of purple light materialized in the air, spinning rapidly around his skeletal frame. Siryu shattered the massive iron doors of the inner sanctum with a single, thunderous blow. The hero leaped into the air, aiming his glowing broadsword directly at the necromancer's exposed skull. As the golden blade cleaved through the sorcerer's heavy robes, the soul transference ritual reached its absolute climax. A massive vortex of dark cosmic energy imploded, consuming both the citadel and the landscape for miles around. Then, the absolute silence of a completely different reality suddenly enveloped the wandering soul. A sudden, agonizing gasp for air forced open a pair of human eyes in a cold, dark place. The ancient entity realized it was no longer looking through the hollow eye sockets of a skeleton. A thick, viscous puddle of fresh blood coated the concrete beneath the boy's fragile back. Trembling fingers reached up to touch a horrific laceration spanning across his entire throat. This human body belonged to a boy named Polka Shinoyama, who had been brutally murdered just moments prior. Residual strands of high-precision necromancy began to pulse automatically within the dying flesh. The severed blood vessels and torn muscles of the throat began to slowly knit back together with tiny magical sparks. With a heavy, rattling breath, the newly reborn Polka pushed himself up from the crimson puddle. He staggered out of the pitch-black corridor, completely overwhelmed by an assault of strange noises. Towering glass monoliths reached toward the heavens, covered in massive screens showing moving images. Thousands of strange people dressed in bizarre attire walked past him without sparing a single glance. The necromancer quickly extended his senses to search for the ambient magical energy of this world. To his profound horror, the atmosphere was completely barren, entirely devoid of any natural mana. Without ambient mana, his world-bending magical powers would be severely limited by his own life force. He looked down at his stained clothes, noticing a strange plastic device sticking out of his pocket. The glass screen suddenly lit up with an incoming text message from an unknown contact. The message simply read, "Is the target confirmed dead yet, Misaki?" A sudden instinct for survival screamed inside the necromancer's freshly integrated mind. A shadowy figure stepped out from the darkness of a nearby building alcove. The young woman possessed a maniacal smile, her eyes reflecting the absolute joy of a predator. She lunged forward with terrifying speed, aiming to slice open the boy's throat once again. Polka barely avoided the blade, feeling the cold wind brush against his freshly healed skin. He realized this persistent human female was the assassin who had executed the original owner of this body. With his physical movements restricted by this weak vessel, he had no choice but to deploy ancient sorcery. The spectral hands of the deceased began to manifest directly out of the solid pavement. The assassin paused in absolute bewilderment as the ghostly appendages wrapped tightly around her ankles. Polka stood up completely, his gaze radiating the ancient majesty of a god of death. Suddenly, the heavy sound of mechanical footsteps echoed from the main street, accompanied by flashing red lights. The assassin smiled wider, whispering that the cleanup crew had arrived to finish the job. Polka felt an unknown, massive hostile presence locking directly onto his fading magical signature. The suffocating pressure of the hostile presence weighed heavily on Polka as he scanned the darkened alleyway. Beside him, the lethal assassin Misaki gripped her customized daggers, her eyes narrowing into slits as she sensed the sudden shift in the air. The magical signature pulsing within Polka's fragile new body flickered erratically like a dying flame. Realizing they could not fight in the open, Misaki grabbed Polka's arm and dragged him toward an unmarked black sedan parked nearby. The engine roared to life instantly as they threw themselves into the back seat, escaping the immediate area. Their destination was a secure underground nightclub owned by Clarissa, the most influential information broker in Shinjuku's underworld. Clarissa sat behind a massive mahogany desk inside her lavish private lounge, swirling a glass of amber liquid. She evaluated the young man before her, knowing full well that the real Polka Shinoyama should be dead. Polka confessed his true identity as the corpse god, explaining the soul transference ritual without omitting a single detail. Instead of calling for backup, Clarissa let out a sharp laugh, thoroughly entertained by the preposterous yet undeniable truth. A powerful sorcerer from another world was an asset too valuable to lose, prompting her to offer a formal alliance. Polka accepted her terms on one condition, demanding a secluded place where he could live in complete peace. By dawn, Clarissa provided him with the keys to an abandoned, multi-story building located on the edge of the district. The structure was old, covered in dust, and carried an eerie reputation that kept ordinary citizens far away. For a necromancer, however, the dense negative energy clinging to the walls made it an absolute paradise. Misaki immediately claimed the top floor as her personal lookout, scattering her target charts across the floor. Polka retired to the basement, drawing a massive, intricate magic circle on the concrete floor using specialized chalk. As he channeled his remaining mana, the sigils began to glow with a brilliant, pulsing purple light. From the shadows of the basement, multiple skeletal hands burst through the floorboards to answer his call. Small, agile skeletal familiars assembled themselves completely, bowing low before their ancient master. He ordered the undead servants to begin cleaning the property, restoring order to his new sanctuary. For a few brief hours, Polka enjoyed the quiet domestic life he had craved for centuries. Suddenly, a violent explosion rocked the neighborhood, shattering several windows on the lower levels. Thick black smoke began pouring from an apartment complex just across the narrow street. Terrified screams echoed through the air as residents fled the rapidly spreading inferno. Misaki leaped onto the balcony, pointing out a group of children trapped on the top floor behind iron security bars. Polka knew that using magic openly would expose him, but he could not stand by and watch innocents perish. He activated his necromancy, shielding his skeletal familiars with illusions before sending them into the blaze. The invisible skeletal minions scrambled across the telephone lines with unnatural speed and agility. They breached the burning building's upper windows, disregarding the intense heat that scorched their bones. Inside the room, 3 young children clung to each other, weeping as thick smoke filled their lungs. The children gasped as ghostly, shimmering figures materialized through the smoke to gently lift them up. With immense supernatural strength, a larger skeletal familiar tore the iron security bars completely off the window frame. The familiars carried the children out of the window, leaping safely across the alleyway onto Polka's balcony. Misaki immediately wrapped the shivering children in warm blankets, checking them over for any serious injuries. Polka collapsed into a chair, his face pale as the heavy use of magic drained his unaccustomed body. The oldest child looked up, whispering a heartfelt thank you to the mysterious teenagers who saved them. Watching them safe and unharmed, Polka felt a profound sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced in his past life. He knew that protecting the innocent in this chaotic world would be his ultimate path to achieving true peace. Down on the street below, a sinister figure cloaked in heavy shadows stood perfectly still amidst the arriving fire trucks. The figure adjusted a pair of glowing high-tech binoculars, focusing them directly on Polka's balcony. An eerie mechanical voice whispered into a hidden collar communicator confirming that the target's location had finally been verified. High above, Polka suddenly froze as a sharp chilling sensation pierced his soul, signaling that an entirely new danger had just arrived at his doorstep. The unnatural chill lingering in the air of the sanctuary grew sharper with every passing second. Misaki tilted her head, her sharp instincts immediately picking up on the sudden shift in Polka's demeanor. Outside, the neon-drenched streets of Shinjuku buzzed with their usual chaotic energy, oblivious to the gathering supernatural storm. Deep within the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police Department, specialized investigators stared at a monitor displaying recent anomalies. Inspector Tsubaki adjusted his glasses, convinced that the recent fire rescue involved something far beyond normal human capability. Meanwhile, a shadowy figure known only as Lemmings leaped silently across the rooftops, completely blending into the darkness. The legendary assassin carried an aura of absolute death, tracking the faint remnants of foreign magical residue. Back inside the building, Clarissa paced back and forth, while typing rapidly on her secure smartphone. She informed Polka that multiple underworld factions had just mobilized to investigate the mysterious skeletal entities. Polka took a deep breath, realizing he needed to secure his position before the sanctuary was completely overrun. He walked over to a workbench where a compact, multi-limbed mechanical drone vessel lay deactivated. This machine was the chosen vessel intended to house the wandering soul of the real original Polka Shinoyama. The disembodied spirit of the real Polka floated nearby, appearing as a faint, shimmering blue orb of light. To perform this complex ritual, the corpse god required absolute concentration and an immense amount of mana. Suddenly, the reinforced front doors of the lower warehouse erupted inward with a deafening crash. A group of heavily armed corporate mercenaries flooded the entrance, their weapons raised and ready to fire. Misaki grinned wildly, pulling her signature custom combat knives from her hidden holsters. Without a moment of hesitation, she lunged forward like a phantom, slicing through the lead soldier's weapon. Gunfire erupted through the corridors, the bright muzzle flashes illuminating the dusty air in rapid bursts. Clarissa pulled out a sleek submachine gun from beneath her elegant coat, providing suppressing fire from behind a pillar. Upstairs, Polka remained completely isolated from the chaos, blocking out the loud echoes of the ongoing battle. A complex, glowing geometric pattern unfurled across the floor, locking the drone and the spirit orb in its center. The original Polka's soul pulsed violently as the ancient magic began to bind its essence to the synthetic circuits. The mercenary captain realized they were losing ground and ordered his remaining men to bypass the guards and head upstairs. Suddenly, the shadows in the corner of the staircase elongated and several skeletal hands materialized from the wall. The lead soldier screamed as the undead constructs tightly gripped his legs, pulling him into the darkness. Outside the building, the police perimeter closed in, their red and blue sirens painting the pavement in alternating hues. Inspector Tsubaki watched the building intently, knowing that an unauthorized military-grade clash was happening inside. High above them, the silent killer lemmings dropped from a higher roof directly onto a police cruiser, crushing its roof instantly. Officers scrambled for cover as the enigmatic assassin stood up, completely unbothered by the heavy impact. With blinding speed, lemmings dashed past the police lines, knocking weapons away without killing a single officer. He smashed through a side window of the sanctuary, entering the structure to find the source of the magical power. Inside the workshop, Polka reached the absolute climax of the forbidden soul transference incantation. The shimmering blue orb vanished entirely into the machine, causing its mechanical joints to snap into alignment. The small drone levitated smoothly into the air, its cameras spinning as the original Polka spoke through its speaker.
I can see you, and I can move.
The mechanical vessel chimed in a synthesized version of the boy's voice. Their brief moment of success was instantly shattered as the heavy workshop wall exploded inward. Lemmings stood amidst the settling dust, his dark featureless mask fixated directly on the reanimated necromancer. Polka immediately raised a massive defensive barrier of spinning purple sigils to shield the fragile drone vessel. Before anyone could make a move, a terrifying, massive distortion in space began to tear open directly behind Lemmings, revealing a glimpse of an even greater nightmare. The massive distortion in space continued to rip open violently directly behind Lemmings, casting an eerie violet glare across the dark Shinjuku alleyway. From the center of the tearing rift, Civil stepped forward with a malicious grin plastered across his face as his rogue energy destabilized the surrounding air. Shinjuku's neon lights began to flicker rapidly as waves of unstable supernatural energy radiated outward from Civil's body. Civil raised his hands toward the sky, causing a series of jagged crimson magic circles to manifest across the clouds. Citizens on the ground stopped in their tracks, staring upward in sheer terror as the atmosphere turned heavy and suffocating. Polka Shinoyama stepped forward into the clearing, his silver hair swaying gently against the sudden, unnatural gale. The mechanical drone containing the soul of the original Polka hummed to life, hovering steadily right beside the young necromancer's shoulder. Civil laughed hysterically before unleashing a volley of sharp crystalline shards straight toward Polka. With absolute composure, Polka extended his right hand and formed a multi-layered intricate purple shield in midair. The sharp crimson shards smashed violently against the magical barrier, dissolving into a harmless mist of sparks. Recognizing the sheer scale of the danger, Polka closed his eyes and began chanting an ancient spell from his past life. Towering, luminescent magical sigils materialized on the ground around the entire perimeter of the Shinjuku district. From the depths of the glowing sigils, majestic ancestral spirits began to materialize, their forms crafted from pure light and bone. Civil's smile finally faltered as he felt the overwhelming godlike pressure of the ancient world filling the modern streets. Polka opened his glowing purple eyes and pointed his finger directly toward the rogue threat. The massive ancestral spirits lunged forward simultaneously, their colossal spectral swords cutting clean through Civil's crimson barriers. Civil attempted to open another chaotic rift to escape, but the sheer density of Polka's magic held the space completely locked. Polka channeled his remaining energy into a single definitive ancient spell designed to neutralize malevolent souls without destroying the world. A massive beam of pure purifying energy erupted from the orb, engulfing Civil entirely in a flash of blinding light. Civil let out one final, echoing cry as his rogue power was utterly unmade and dissolved by the ancient necromancy. As the rogue energy vanished completely, the jagged crimson circles in the sky shattered like fragile glass, revealing the calm night stars. Polka lowered his hands slowly, his breathing heavy as the colossal ancestral spirits faded gently back into the ether. The mechanical drone drifted down to eye level, its glowing visor pulsing with a soft, appreciative rhythm. Misaki rushed out from the shadows of a nearby building, a massive, bright smile lighting up her face as she waved enthusiastically. Clarissa stepped out right behind her, adjusting her glasses with a satisfied smirk while checking her phone for underworld updates. The heavy, terrifying atmosphere that had gripped the entire city completely evaporated, replaced by the familiar hum of modern Shinjuku traffic. Police investigators in the distance lowered their binoculars, realizing the supernatural crisis had been completely averted by unknown protectors. Polka looked at his gathered friends, feeling a deep, genuine sense of belonging that he had never experienced in his past life. He lightly tapped the mechanical drone, reassuring the soul of the original Polka that their shared body was safe and secure. Together, the group turned away from the battlefield and began walking back toward their secret sanctuary building. Inside the sanctuary, small skeletal familiars busied themselves, cleaning up and preparing warm tea for everyone's return. Polka sat down on the comfortable sofa, taking a steaming cup of tea handed over by one of his miniature undead creations. He gazed out the wide window at the sparkling cityscape, reflecting on the long, chaotic journey that had brought him to this world. The ancient conflicts of his past life were finally laid to rest, replaced by a firm vow to protect this new, fragile peace. Misaki burst into laughter over a joke, her bright energy filling the sanctuary with undeniable warmth and life. The mechanical drone floated up to the windowsill, resting peacefully under the gentle silver beams of the moon. Polka realized that his immense necromantic power was no longer a tool for war, but a shield to safeguard his found family. The future stretched out before them, completely bright, secure and entirely free from the shadows of rogue threats. Sitting among those he loved, the legendary corpse god finally closed his eyes with a serene smile, knowing he had found his ultimate sanctuary. In the heart of modern Shinjuku, a unique harmony between magic and humanity had been beautifully and permanently established.